to be back there, and unfortunately we couldn't do as much as we did the first time, but we did a fair amount. And the smell of the fresh air and the beautiful sea, it's just such a beautiful place. If you've never been to Maine, the Arcadia Park area is so worth going to. It's, you know, it was just gorgeous. So we had a great time, and today Mike is off to the climate march.
Are there any other joys and sorrows today? Kevin?
Hi, I'm Kevin. As most of you know, my wife Carolyn's fighting cancer right now. She had a rough week, and we took her into the clinic, and they hydrated her, and she's now feeling somewhat better. And 2 weeks from now, she will take her final course of chemotherapy, and hopefully then start getting her energy back. Also, our son Kyle woke up with an upset stomach this morning, so he usually operates the Bluetooth, and he's not here. So my thanks to Ben for assisting this morning.
Good morning, I'm Sarah Rachel, and I just have a sorrow, sadness of a feeling for all the people that were lost in Libya. And again, it's exacerbated by global warming of the Mediterranean. It's had their own internal problems, but it's a sad thing. We really need to take global warming very seriously. Thank you.
And this is Climate Week, and I'm sure that that's part of the inspiration that Ember had. Somebody is beeping. That Ember had for today's service. Are there any other joys and sorrows? Well, you know, we certainly thank everyone for sharing, and sometimes we kind of need to sit with things a little bit. So if you're holding them in your heart, very understandable. We're glad to hear any of the joys and sorrows that anybody is willing and able to share with us today. So onward and upward. Okay, now it's going to be time for our meditation. It's not in your order of service, so sorry to surprise everybody, but we are returning to our usual meditation practice for every Sunday. So I will offer a quote to help focus our meditation, and I'll use the chime to alert. At that point, I'll invite you to begin the meditation, take some deep breaths. It's usually a nice way to help center yourself. And after a few minutes, I'll ring the bell again to mark our time. Today's quote is from Jane Goodall. You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make.
Our reading for today's service comes from Margaret Klein Salamon's Facing the Climate Emergency. I believe there is an unseen, powerful force on our planet that wants to live. It's a force that exists inside all of us. It's why our hearts beat without our own volition. It's the reason we're able to breathe without conscious effort. The vital force ensures that we, along with plants, other animals, and even microbes, seek out hospitable environments in which to grow and reproduce. The force that wants to live could be a product of evolution. Plants and animals that don't display a drive to eat, drink, and avoid predators die. This life force also manifests in our collective desire not to protect just our own lives, but to protect all life.
Now it's the time in our order of service where we request and take an offering. We know it is the gifts of all of us that help support our ability to thrive and to gather. For those attending in person, we will be coming around. Sue and Randy will be coming around passing the collection plate. For those online, links and instructions will be posted in the chat. You can mail us a check or donate through PayPal giving page on our website. Please give as generously as you can. Our offerings will now be gratefully received.
All things are connected. Whatever befalls the earth, befalls the children of the earth. All things share the same breath. The beast, the trees, the man. The air shares the spirit with all the life that supports. You did not leave the letter from the many times and wherever we do, wherever we do, this we know. All things are connected, all living share the same bread. All things are connected, the air shares a spirit with all life. All things are connected, just like the blood which unites us all. All things are connected, whatever befalls, the earth befalls the children of the earth. Treat the earth well. It was not given to you by your parents. It was loaned to you by your children. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. Let it speak to you. The fragrance of the flower and the freshness of the grass. The music of the sea. Let it speak to you. Through hills and mountains, singing skies and the sky. The rhythm of life. All things are connected, just like the blood which unites us all. All things are connected, whatever befalls, the earth befalls the children of the earth. All things are connected. All things are connected. All things are connected. All things. Only after the last tree has been cut down, only after the last river has been frozen, Only after the last fish has been caught, only then will we find money to not be eaten.
Each grabbed a great hymnal, and we got change in the service. We'll be singing number 123, Spirit of Life.
There you go.
Please stand and join us.
Take a moment to picture with me, if you will, a middle schooler waking up from a nap at home. The youth's parents had finally let them stay home alone. So sometimes they wake up and no one's home because they are trusted that they'll be fine on their own with the parents off running chores. Surely this has to be a moment of youthful celebration, of newfound independence and autonomy, of excitement of finally being old enough to be trusted to be alone. However, for a young Ember, this was not the case. You see, I had a ritual. Anytime I woke up from a nap as a teenager and I was the only one home, sometimes I was given notice, sometimes I wasn't given notice. Anytime that this happened, the first thing that would flash across my mind was not freedom and not excitement. No, it was a worry that I had slept through the rapture, that the apocalypse had started, and that I was without my family because I had failed at being a real believer. For those not in the know, the rapture is a specific set of beliefs of a specific group of evangelical Christians. However, included amongst them was the Christianity that I grew up in. It is the belief that the apocalypse is near, that all the signs of biblical prophecies were being fulfilled in our modern day, and it was believed that before this final stretch of the apocalypse, that true believers in Jesus would be spared the apocalypse by being raptured, that they would hear the sound of a trumpet and disappear suddenly. The rest of the world would be left confused by 1 million or maybe a few billion people missing, including, in their theory, all children under the age of 10 or so, a dubious age of being able to understand line. And everyone would be left to endure a final 7 years of tribulation, an antichrist, the mark of the beast, and global pestilence sent by God. Perhaps you might have heard of the Left Behind books. They were a hugely popular series in the 2000s that even managed to break into mainstream fiction circles. And they chronicled the life of those left behind after the rapture. I read them voraciously, first the kids' novels, but when they only had the first adult book covered in about 8 kids' novels, and that was all they had at the time, I quickly moved on to the adult versions because they were taking too long to publish them. I think part of me, knowing that I was hiding the secret of being trans, figured that this would doom me from my chances of being taken up in the rapture. So I needed to read these books like an instruction manual. What did I need to be prepared for? Would I be prepared to survive the horrors and the plagues? Would I stand up for Jesus when I was being told to take the mark of the beast? These were the things I thought about as a middle schooler. So I would repent in chapel regularly, knowing that the rapture and the apocalypse were coming soon, that all signs pointed to it, and that soon I would either be raptured or stuck, left behind. However, I first began to denounce the rapture to my friends while in high school. I discovered that more traditional evangelicalism and mainline Christianity had never really held this belief, and in fact, it was invented in the 20th century. But even a decade removed from this brand of Christianity, there are still times that my brain thinks about the rapture and this fundamentalist version of the apocalypse as a real possibility. Sometimes when I wake up from a nap and no one's around and I wonder, was I incorrect? Did I make the wrong choice? And I've tried to explain this to friends and colleagues, to explain growing up in this fundamentalist narrative, to explain how hardwired this was into my view of reality. And people always seem truly amazed that people grew up in this worldview. So for me, it's fascinating that I'm raising my own 2 children who are 7 and 9, and I'm raising them in Unitarian Universalism. Because you see, liberal progressive religion does not have this same fear element. For that, I'm very thankful. Unitarianism and Universalism, they both came from traditions of intense optimism. Unitarianism was known that there was this optimism in humanity and our belief that humanity was going to be able to improve. And Universalism and its optimism in believing that surely a loving God would never send everyone to an eternal hell. And that religion, combined with American beliefs in destiny, democracy, and being the shining light on the hill, led to this belief that the world was always improving, that any challenge would be quickly overcome to restore balance and return to the march for progress. After all, the arc bends towards justice, right? This optimism has been a balm in my own recovery from this growing up in this imminent expectation of the end of the world and of being sent to hell. However, what can this optimism do in the face of a crisis of apocalyptic proportions? It was 1938 when the scientist G.S. Callender argued that the level of carbon dioxide was climbing and this was going to raise global temperatures. He was disbelieved in his time, but began to be believed as evidence grew in the 50s and 60s. By the 1970s, even Shell Oil had scientists affirming that much of the same was true according to their own internal research. Yet 85 years after the first mainstream scientific conjecture that our fumes might be bad for the earth, and 50 years since a fair amount of consensus was being reached, the picture continues to grow more apocalyptic. Fires in Canada so bad that a provincial capital had to be evacuated. Fires that were so bad that they polluted air throughout the United States and briefly turned our skies here in New York City a shade of orange. Increasingly powerful and more frequent earthquakes, heat waves and heat domes, some of the warmest ocean temperatures ever seen. News channels even began mentioning that scientists called this summer one of the hottest in the history of humanity. As someone who grew up with an apocalyptic worldview, it's hard not to view this through an apocalyptic lens. The difference being that this is an apocalypse of our own creation as a society, a self-inflicted apocalypse, if you will. but it's also an apocalypse that we have the power to confront. We have the ability to come together. And I know that many UUs are working hard on fighting for climate justice, working to improve things in their congregation and in their wider communities, and are pushing for political action on green initiatives. But is this a moment where our endless optimism is in fact slowing us from grasping what I would dare to call the apocalyptic urgency of the moment? Has this become just another project to work on in our march towards progress, instead of something that needs to be confronted with a sense of urgency? During 2021, the urgency of the need for action hit me, despite having previously been what I would have called climate aware. It was in 2021 that this urgency finally hit. As we prepared to come back in person in much of society and in the Unitarian Universalist world, I bought this little carbon dioxide detector. It was shared online as a way to tell how well air circulation was going. It's going all right in here. I'm talking a lot, so I'm sending a lot of hot air towards it. And it's been great. When I rode the bus into the city and saw that it had reached 3,000, I was very happy that I was wearing a mask because the bus did not have very good ventilation and it was filled with people. And when I saw that the windows in my apartment, when they were open, that we were almost the same as the level outside, I was excited that airflow was going through our apartment well. After all, it was hitting around 400 to 450. Right now we're at 922. But 400 to 450 was the same as the outdoor presence of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The reason this caused the urgency of the climate moment to hit me was when I started researching when that had become the normal level. And in fact, the last time that carbon dioxide was at this point in history was the Pliocene era of Earth's history, roughly 3 million years ago. A few million years of time on each side. And it was a time when the sea levels were 40 to 50 feet higher and Arctic summer temperatures were 15 degrees higher. That's a little bit different of a world. I think 50 meter sea level rise might kind of mess things up here in Staten Island. And it's not one that sounds particularly habitable for our current global civilization, where we're dependent on agriculture that has thrived in these lower temperatures. And it was looking at this number that I realized how drastically action needed to be taken. It feels like a moment of an amount of apocalyptic concern being needed to me. However, there isn't a rapture to save us all from this suffering. Rather, we must come together to save each other. Today marks the beginning of Climate Week here in New York City. In fact, as we've heard in our Joys and Concerns, marchers are marching through the city today, and events are happening all week. The theme of this year's Climate Week is "We Can, We Will," reflecting a desire to act on what needs to be done to face the reality of the moment. More and more people are waking up to the reality of the climate crisis, even when the news and the government may refuse to officially connect the strange weather conditions with our climate crisis. In the context of this "We Can and We Will" theme, the Climate Week is asking some tough questions. They recognize that things are moving slowly, so they ask, where must investments be channeled, and what vested interests need to be held accountable? They see that some countries are having a willingness to make investments, and they acknowledge that we have solutions, but how do we make sure that things are implemented? And importantly, they also ask how we stay inspired, stay the course, and continue to drive climate action fast. When confronted with something this huge, we must not simply give in to doom and fear like I felt as a young kid facing my imagined version of the apocalypse. But that doesn't also mean that we embrace optimism for optimism's sake. I think both of these ways, doom and optimism, both of these ways of approaching climate crisis derive from the problematic way of living that got us into the mess in the first place. It is a removal of the individual entirely from their communal context of pure individualism. This removal from our communal context makes us think that our fate in an apocalypse and our fate in life is up to our individual choices and planning. That is the reason why we have preppers stockpiling supplies and building bunkers, because they believe that their self-reliance will be the only way to survive the fall of society as we know it. Being connected to others is to them a risk and a security concern. We manage to dig ourselves into this situation by our society, placing the onus of confronting climate change on the individuals changing their habits, instead of pushing for companies to change their products that they made in the ways that they made them. We looked at the benefits of more industry that would bring more CO2, but would also bring us more jobs, better technology, and a rising GDP. We embraced an economic system that is built on the assumption of endless growth in a world that has finite resources. We embraced pure individualism, forgetting our responsibility to each other's and to the world. And by thinking only of our doom and how to keep ourselves safe, or thinking only of the optimistic signs that the government and leaders are taking care of things, so we don't really need to worry, these embrace that same individualism. It's not enough for us to exist as isolated individuals. Because what this crisis needs is not detached individuals. No, what this demands of us is that we learn and know how to exist in community. To face a crisis like this on a local scale, it means having communities like our own, with people who care deeply about one another and care for each other's well-being. Because when emergencies and disasters happen, communities that are strong and healthy help to take care of others. On a bigger scale, it also means caring about our world community as climate refugees are created. It means rethinking the way that we redistribute food so that as our agricultural system might get strained, that instead of wealthy nations stockpiling, instead we are building a global economy where we are all taking care of each other. And most importantly, it means being part of societies that take action to prepare, counter, and repair in the face of climate change, instead of doing things minimally and slowly. I suppose this might be hard to picture, given that just 3 years ago, people were protesting in the streets about wearing masks and taking basic health precautions during a global pandemic. But I refuse to believe that that response is the only way that humanity can respond to a crisis. Maybe it's that Unitarian optimism that is rubbing off on me. I believe in life's ability to persevere. As our reading today said, there's a life force that manifests in our collective desire not to protect just our own lives, but to protect all life. Or, as was famously said in the Jurassic Park movies, life will find a way. I refuse to simply let the apocalypse happen. We must refuse to let the web of life, which we hold so dear as you use, face destruction. I refuse to dream of a rapture coming to save me because I have seen the beauty of communities taking care of each other. I have seen people share immense love for each other, and I have felt that love from many people in my own life. I've even seen New Yorkers, famous for their brashness in the rest of the United States, care for random strangers in big and small ways. Humanity is too beautiful. Community is too beautiful. Each and every one of us is worth fighting for. We aren't fighting back against the climate crisis alone. We are doing it together. And we succeed doing it across generations, across cultures, and across nations, together. And we do this for generations not even born, because these future generations are worth fighting for. As a mom to a 7 and a 9-year-old, I have pondered what the worrying climate signs mean for my own children's future. But I will not give into a sense of doom. Instead, I will teach them a mindset of existing in community, of being resourceful, of caring deeply for both our neighbors and the broader web of life. And most importantly, I teach them, and I urge all of you to do the same as well, to imagine a better world. We can't create these solutions and build this new communal future without dreaming of it first. I am part of a group of UUs planning a festival and a service next Saturday, appropriately titled We Imagine, We Create. We based this title off of the Climate Week theme, and we wanted to give it a UU twist. Because in this community together, we can dream of a better world. I've had people ask me what my ideal world, what my ideal community looks like. And I have said, honestly and truly, that UU communities in their best moments have given me my vision of a better world. They're a space where people with drastically different life experiences, with different beliefs, with different expressions, can coexist and care for one another in community. So it is in the space of community that I am able to see this nugget of an idea of what a better world could be. In community, we're able to bounce ideas for how to confront these problems back and forth off of each other. And in community, we can take this time to imagine together this better world. We can imagine a society that prioritizes all people instead of endless economic growth. We can imagine creative ways to respond, counter, and adapt to the climate crisis. And driven by that imagination and our need to act urgently, we can work together to create that new and better world. We create the new world each time we care deeply for each other, when we listen even when it's hard, and when we act even if it means being vulnerable. We can create it amongst ourselves, with our wider communities, and with our neighbors. We can find ways to care, and in caring deeply, we can give birth to a better world. This doesn't mean sacrificing our individuality. After all, that is what I love about the UU vision of community. We can celebrate our difference and uniqueness. We can each contribute different things to our community, but also to the work needed to be done for facing this climate crisis. In creating community amongst difference, we model that it is possible for the wider world. We are not dreaming of a world where we're all the same and all suffering. No, we are dreaming of a world where we are all thriving and able to live whole lives. We model that our world can confront this crisis, and instead of sacrificing billions so that the wealthy can continue to make money and flee to Mars when they get too worried, we can imagine and create a world where life thrives, communities where life thrives. Life wants to thrive. We want to thrive, and we thrive best when we are individuals existing in community. Those two do not need to be opposed to each other. We must come together as individuals with deep and genuine care for each other. This is our key for facing whatever life and whatever the future might throw at us. This is our key to confronting the climate crisis.
And I know I commend you to Fourth U's event next Saturday on the 23rd. It was in our e-newsletter. So check your e-newsletter, or by all means, check with Ms. Ember, who can tell you. It's family friendly, but it's not like child-centric or adult-centric. It's family friendly. So if you're a grown-up, it'll be meaningful. If you're a child, it'll be meaningful. I think that's a fair statement. Good. I don't want to sell something if it's not accurate. So I commend you to consider going up to Fourth U next Saturday if your schedule allows. So now please join us in our closing hymn. It's in the Teal Book, number 1064, Blue Boat Home. As we extinguish our chalice, please join me in reciting the affirmation. You'll find it in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. For these we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our closing words come from the basket woven by Ma Teresa Tet Gustillo Gallardo. May we respond better to risks and dangers with a beloved community who can be counted on as a woven basket that encompasses the gifts for protection, for honor, for ceremony, and for expressions of interconnectedness. May we prevail in our intentions to make a gift of the world to the next generations, of beings living and non-living, that help it all come together for good.